Hello, guys. Thanks for joining us again. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to a man named Peter. And as you can see from the title, we're wondering what is going on in the world. Are things about to get worse? Peter, I believe, is a businessman, and I heard he's from Alabama, which means he's from my part of the woods. I think he has experience in real estate, which I also have. You may not know about me. And he actually came to Russia by way of Dan of Wild Siberia. I said that right for the first time, I believe. And has also lived with Kevin from America in Crimea at his compound. And now I believe he's in Yalta. Let me bring him on now. And I'm going to ask him the question that I ask everybody, and he can set the record straight about who he really is and why he's living in Russia. Welcome to EXPAT American, Peter. Tell us, who are you?
Thanks, Joe, for the warm welcome there. Well, I'm an American. And I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, in North Alabama. Originally, my family was from Iowa, but my dad was a rocket engineer. And when I was very young, we relocated to Huntsville, which is Rocket City, USA. And I grew up around rocket engineers everywhere. All my friends basically work for NASA. I'm one of the few guys who didn't go work for NASA. But I have a degree in mathematics. But immediately after I graduated, I was recruited by an engineering company in Huntsville as a computer engineer. And so most of my career, I was a computer engineer. And I also worked for Apple Computer for a while as a technical support representative. That was interesting, working for Apple.
Yeah.
And then my last job was as an engineering advisor at a small Christian college in Southern Illinois, just outside of St. Louis. And that was I left that job in late 2020.
Wow. So Christian college in St. Louis. I went to St. Louis once and saw the arch. In fact, I think I took the elevator up into the arch. So are you a Christian as well, Peter, or was that just a coincidence you're working at a Christian college?
No, actually, one of the requirements that you work there is that you be a devout Christian. And actually, the school it's called Principia College, and it's associated with the Christian Science Church, which the headquarters is in Boston, Massachusetts. So I'm a lifelong Christian Scientist, and grew up in Christian Science.
I'm not an expert in that denomination. But I guess you're a member of that denomination, and that was one of the requirements to be interviewed. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. And so I left that position because of the worldwide medical event that caused people to put masks on, and they locked down the campus like a prison camp. And I'm like, I'm not down with this. So I gracefully my resignation.
I see. So you had to leave them because of that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you using your words carefully, and that's why I laughed, because you did a good job saying that without giving words the algorithm doesn't like.
Right.
All right. Very good. So you are now in Russia. So my next question to you is, why did you leave America?
Well, that same medical event kind of woke me up and to like, okay, what's going on here? Why are things so extreme? So I started really at that point, and the main reason wasn't so much the medical event in and of itself. It's like you said, my family's in real estate. We own property. We own a lot of rental property. And one of my jobs in that role and associated with my family is to kind of understand what's happening in the economy, what, kind of guide the family in directions, what we should do with our properties. And so I became very concerned about, okay, how is this medical event going to impact our family business. So at that point, I started doing a deep dive, and the deeper I dove, the worse the picture got. I mean, and now I have a pretty clear picture. I think what's going on, and it's not good at all, is I don't any longer trust the U.S. government. I think their economic policies are terrible and have been for a long time. And right now, I think the United States and most of the West is on the brink of the second Great Depression. I know that sounds extreme, but I think my research basically confirms this. And so I tried to warn my family about this.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say.
I tried to warn my friends and family.
Okay, and?
I
guess
none
there's
will
a
believe
slight
it.
lag. Just go ahead. Keep talking.
Yeah. And the bizarre thing is, I was like, okay, I've got all these facts I've gathered. You need to look at them. And they all refused. Like, we don't want to look at the facts. I'm like, okay, this isn't computing with me. These are facts. This isn't my opinion. These are solid facts I've found on the fundamentals of the U.S. economy are dangerously close to collapse.
Okay. All right, Peter, then so what I want to ask you then, because I am living in Russia, I'm an American, but I've said before, I wasn't like running from America. I came here because my wife is Russian. And I was like, okay, sure. We lived, in America together. She's homesick. I've vacationed in Russia to know enough that it's a good place. It's not the bad guy place like I was raised to believe. So why not live here for a while? And so that's what we decided to do. Now, since I've been here, I've seen how wonderful it is. Because like a movie, you're told a movie is good and then you go see it and your expectation's so high you don't like it. The reverse is true. You're told the movie's bad and then you go see it. You're like, wait, this is a pretty good movie. And that's been my experience with Russia. So, and because of this show that I do, I've been learning a little bit more and more about politics and world politics and Russia and America. So I'm slowly waking up to things. I guess my opinion right now is America is sick. America's having a hard time, but I hope that it gets better. And I think that Russia's a better place to be right now. But what I want to know from you is because you said you talked to your family. So how could you simplify this for us if you could make a case? Because I'm curious, if I didn't have a Russian wife, should I come here anyway? Should I move to Russia anyway? Because yes, I do believe that the quality of life is way better in Russia now compared to America. But if we were to rewind 30 years, it would be the reverse, And what that also means is 30 years from now, well, for you and I, it won't matter. But for other people, will it have switched back again? Should you move without a Russian wife? I guess the question, and how might you make your case? If you were to try and simplify it, maybe give us 3 things that are hard to, ignore.
Sure. Well, in my research, what I found is this economic damage just didn't start recently. It goes all the way back to the early 20th century, around the 1910, 1913 time frame. So in that over 100 years of economic damage, we're about to experience the cumulative effect of all that damage. And you can't do over 100 years of damage and think it's going to be quickly resolved. So I believe once this economic storm starts, it's going to be at least 20 years before we get to the other side of the storm. As far as I can tell, the U.S. government's either in complete denial of this fact, or they're just lying to us, or maybe it's just a combination of both. I don't know. But it became very clear to me that things are going to get pretty crazy in America pretty quickly. And so I started thinking, okay, my leaders and the leadership is not what I consider coherent or sane. Where are the sane leaders in the world? And so I started looking around, and I don't even know how I kind of came up with Russia. And the more I looked at the Russian leadership, I'm like, wow, these people are brilliant. I mean, not just sharp, but brilliant with politics, with economic policy, with how they've handled things. And I've come to the studied conclusion that Russia, during this worldwide economic storm, will be the very best country to be in to weather this storm. Okay. Now, I think Russia's very, very well prepared for the storm. And some events have happened. At the time, they seemed like negative things for Russia, but I think they were blessings in disguise. One was in 2014, there were sanctions put on Russia because of events. And these sanctions at the time seemed like a negative thing, but I think it was the start of Russia going, okay, we're going to have to decouple from the Western economic system because these people on the other side of the equation aren't playing fairly. And so when these latest sanctions hit, I mean, it was much less painful than it could have been because Russia, since 2014, has been preparing to decouple from the Western economic system. Right. So I started looking into, okay, how do I come to Russia? And to your point, I found Dan at Wild Siberia. He had, on his YouTube channel, said to people, hey, if you want to come to Russia, I can host you. So I contacted Dan. We spoke a while, and that route was the route that I took to come to Russia.
Huh. Okay. Well, let's get back to your explanation as to why things are not going well in America. So you're saying as far back as 1910, you think America was having systemic financial problems that were going to lead us to this point that's not recoverable?
Right. Well, actually, that was the start of the two. There were two major events that really started the problem. Is the creation of the Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve is not federal, and there's no reserve. It's not a government agency. It's a consortium of banks that control the printing of money for the U.S. government. And also, that was the same year, in 1913 was the year that the Federal Reserve was created. And also, that was the same year that the national income tax was implemented. And we were lied to about both of those things from the start because they knew these things were not going to be good for America. It was good for the banks, for sure, these two big changes. But these things have not been good for America. And to give you put the numbers on that is in 1910, an ounce of gold was you could buy an ounce of gold for $20. Right now, an ounce of gold is, I don't know, $2,300, $2,400.
Right.
Gold didn't change. The value of our money has been so devalued. Now it takes $2,300 to $2,400 of those same dollars to buy that same ounce of gold.
Right.
Okay. Wealth is never destroyed. It's allocated. It's moved. Where'd that wealth go? It went to the top guys, these bankers. So about 98% of our wealth has been stolen from us over the last 100 plus years. And it's been slowly done through inflation, which is not normal at all. This is something I found in my research. I didn't understand inflation. I do now. Inflation is an artificial creation by the Federal Reserve. And so they literally have stolen 98% of our wealth over the last 100 plus years.
Right. Okay. Well, if that's the case, that doesn't sound nice, obviously.
No,
But what about people who would say, well, they've been inflating for 100 years. Why not just
yeah.
keep inflating? What's the problem with that? Aside from the fact that it's not nice.
Well, the government also lies to us because they call inflation the increase in in the cost of goods. So that's not the definition of inflation. The definition
Mm,
of inflation is more money printed and put into circulation. Well, what that does is it makes the existing money worth less because the more you put into circulation, the less all that money is the value of it.
mhm,
So to
mhm.
your point, they can keep printing money out of thin air, but at some point, relatively soon, it's going to cause hyperinflation, meaning the money will be worthless, essentially.
Right, right.
And so
Okay.
there have been instances of this in Weimar Germany. It happened before, after World War One and before World War Two. That Weimar
Sure.
Germany printed, money, and it devalued their money to a point it was worthless. And we're on that path.
Mhm, mhm. Okay.
So
All right.
yeah,
Well, then how long do we have, Peter?
well, a lot of people expected the system to implode already, but because of um, they're basically the government, U.S. governments, and not just U.S. government, but most European governments, including the UK, are just lying to us.
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
sadly, most people are just sleepwalking and don't understand what's going on at all. Now, there's a very small percentage that are awake and trying to warn people like me, trying to warn
Right.
people. But, but when I try to warn people, my friends and family and people I don't even know look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, okay, well, to answer your question, it's getting closer and closer. It's
Mhm.
hard to know exactly. I'd say I'd be surprised if it goes for another year.
Hmm.
It, it could
Okay.
it, it could it could implode in months or weeks. I don't know. It could go another 5 years. They could, because the problem is most people still trust the system and they shouldn't. So what we're
Mhm.
talking about is when people wake up, we'll reach this point where people will go, "Uh-oh, we're in trouble," and then everybody pulls their money out of the bank, and then at that point, things go nuts. So it's hard
Right.
to predict this crowd behavior. It's hard to predict when people will wake up because I thought people would already wake up, but most people aren't. They're just still sleepwalking in the West, just sleepwalking. So
Well, in living in America, once you're at a certain income level, which many people are, let's say, it's very easy to be asleep to things because
oh
your
yeah,
air conditioner is working and you're
yeah,
eating sugar and your iPhone works. Um,
yeah,
I don't see things, I don't look at things the way you do. I may come to the same conclusion as you, but like I'm not a numbers person, so I wouldn't like look at history and read
yeah,
financial sheets and say, "Oh my gosh, it's about to come to an end." I'd be curious when things got bad in Weimar and then when it
yeah.
ended. Like how long did it take for things to slowly degrade and fall apart? I don't think it was 20 years. Maybe it was. It feels like in the US, they've been talking about a coming collapse for about 20 years. Um, so I don't know, maybe it's the
And
same time frame. Maybe, I don't know.
no, Weimar, I think it was between 2 and 4 years for it to kind of unfold to where
Right,
people, figured out,
right.
hey, this is a mess. Um, and so actually that situation gave rise to the desperate nature of what happened in Germany and the rise of the Nazi Party.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Right.
Maybe I shouldn't use
I got
words like that, but
That's right,
the
Peter. Why did you say that
that
word? What was that word
third
again?
word,
Don't say it. Just
yeah,
kidding. Yeah, it's
yeah,
just better for the algorithm if we don't say certain words, guys, but it's okay.
sure,
Um, so yeah, I mean, again, I came here because my wife is Russian. I do see that the
yeah,
quality of life here is better. Um, I did have a business in Florida. It was getting harder for me to make the numbers work financially. So I
Yeah.
saw that. That was my experience. I have seen that life on the street, meaning when you're outside, when you're not
Yeah.
behind your locked door, it feels safer in Russia, and you can
Yeah.
see it. It's
Oh yeah.
cleaner and safer, and
Yeah.
you don't have as many encounters. In fact, I've never had encounters here which are aggressive,
Yeah.
whereas I
Yeah.
had many in America. Um,
Right.
you see the news stories and you see the filth in videos in America that you don't see here. So
Yeah.
what I can do is I consider myself an average normal guy. Is I can talk about my experience, and I do
Yeah.
see a difference in two countries now. But
Yeah.
your case is more of a historical financial case that you're making.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. All right. Well,
Now the
go ahead. You say
the
say what you want to say, and I'm
the
going to do our first audience question here.
okay. Okay. Um, I still want to start a family. I was married for 10 years to the wrong woman, but I've been divorced for a while, and I want to start
Uh-huh.
a family. And there's just no way I would even consider starting a family in the U.S. today. Just wouldn't do it because of what you've just described. Safety, like I, where I am in southern Crimea, kids play in the streets unattended.
Hmm.
This is I wouldn't allow my kids to play anywhere in the U.S. unattended.
Right.
So
Right.
it's a very very safe place. It's very family oriented, and I'll tell you, I was born in America, but I think I have a Russian soul.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, here's our first audience question. Now, what does Peter think of the reforms of Javier Milei in Argentina? Would that be a good plan, B or C? Country. Oh,
Um,
would that be a good country to consider, I guess is what he's saying.
oh, sure, sure, sure. Um, I think he's, from what I can tell, at least initially, it looks like his reforms are a good idea, and he's really kind of cleaning house. Now, there's a lot of pushback by people who are comfortable with the old system, and
Hmm.
but he's making a lot. What it seems to be a lot of good changes. I think the jury is out on Argentina right now. I think one mistake he's making is I think he he's accepting all crypto, and he's gone to wants to go to the dollar standard, the U.S. dollar, and I think that's a mistake. I think he should go the way what El Salvador has done is go to an all Bitcoin monetary standard, and I think that.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I wouldn't personally consider Argentina's place to go right now, but I would look. I would, if you're going to want to stay in that end of the world, I would look at places like El Salvador because
Mhm.
they have gone to and they've cleaned up. They've gotten rid of a lot of their almost all the crime that was there with the gangs,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so I would look at El Salvador as a strong place to think about if he's in the U.S. to leave the U.S.
Oh, okay. El Salvador. Huh, interesting.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
see,
for sure.
for me, I just since I grew up in America and now I'm living in Russia,
Yeah,
um, if I were to consider other countries, I think that I would, if I'm starting off in a big, powerful country, which, these
yeah,
two countries are, and there are others, um, why would I move to a smaller, a much, much smaller country by comparison, even if it's doing really well? I feel like I wouldn't because things can suddenly not do well. And if the
right.
country, bigger the country is, the longer it's going to take, ideally, for things to really get
Yeah,
bad. And also,
yeah,
the bigger the country is, the more the country can take care of itself. So, just
yeah,
from a practical standpoint, and maybe I'm wrong, if there was this wonderful small country that's just really doing great, I still
yeah,
don't know if I would want to live there. unless, of course, I still had citizenship in other places and I could easily leave
Right.
if I had to. So in that case, I guess maybe it would be a good idea. But
Right.
I know that some people will go to third world countries with their money and they'll live like kings. But
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, what if there's a revolution and,
Yeah.
people are running down the street with machetes, to
Oh yeah.
get rid of all the foreigners, I
Yeah.
mean, maybe I've just
And
watched too many Hollywood
Joe, this
movies,
is the
but
very
that's
reason I
the
chose one of the. Yeah, right. Well, this is one of the very reasons I chose Russia. It's the
uh-huh,
biggest country in the world. It has the most
uh-huh,
resources by far than any country, even more resources than the U.S. by quite a bit, quite a big margin. It's got a
uh-huh,
very strong military, and no country in the world is going to be bullying Russia. No
mhm,
country in the world is going to be rolling into Russia and stealing anything from Russia or Russians. Not going to happen.
mhm,
Because to your point, that would be my concern if I went to Argentina or El Salvador. Is um, yeah, it is how stable is the government now? It looks pretty stable right now. Like El Salvador looks pretty stable right now, but when the poop hits the fan in the world, will it be safe? Will it be stable when things get crazy? Now, that was the
mhm,
main consideration looking at Russia's. I trust Russian leadership because look at how they're handling this big, event happening right now. The Russian leaders are the best in the world, hands down. So I have no doubt that they will handle this coming economic storm better than any leaders in the world. And they prepared. They prepared very very well prepared financially. Um, they've been buying a good explanation of what one of the things they've done to prepare is the Russian government's been buying gold for the last 10 years like crazy.
mhm.
And this is going to be a key thing that you're going to need and want a lot of gold. And that China's done the same thing. China's got crazy, been buying crazy amounts of gold. And China won't even allow gold to be exported out of China. It's illegal.
Mm.
So,
Oh, wow. Very interesting. Huh. Okay, well,
yeah.
this next question kind of leans into what we're talking about. What is your perception of how Russians react to Americans or you, me, but you too, Peter, as this
Yeah.
dilemma continues, like what you were saying before, the issue on Russia's southern border? So, how are we treated? How do Russians feel about us, Peter?
Well, I know for quite a while Russians have had this fondness for America and Americans, and they still think America is this land of opportunity.
Hmm.
Um, um, Russians are very, very intelligent, and they distinguish the actions of the U.S. government from the actions of the U.S. people.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of Russians they're much more um, they're very very well educated. Of They understand most Americans are good people. Um,
Hmm.
I think they also understand the U.S. government is crazy, and even Russian leadership says, "Are you guys crazy?" And the answer is, "Yeah, they are."
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
So um, I've had all my experiences have been positive. I mean,
Mm.
like today, I was going to a cafe and I was dressed fairly not. People, when I'm out and about, they know instantly I'm not Russian because I dress, I guess, like a well dressed American, I guess. So people will actually stop me on the street and start talking to me in English. I
Really?
mean, just people
Okay.
I don't even know. Yeah.
Well, I guess
Yeah, I've
that
had it
happens to me
happen.
too. You're right. People, they talk to me
Yeah.
in English all the time, and I'm asking my wife, "How do they know?" And she's like, "They can just tell by looking at you." Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I don't know where
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The
Zariel.
mannerisms, even if you're dressed like a Russian, the mannerisms, the way we interact. But no, I haven't had any negative experiences here. Now, I am concerned. with the event that happened in Moscow, the bad event where
The Crocus
citizens
terror
were,
attack.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
I know the Russian government and the Russian people are now really pissed. And I hope that doesn't translate into hatred of Americans. Because I'm sure for sure somehow the US government was in support of this nonsense. And the Russian government wants to find the people responsible and hold them accountable. And I think that's good. But
Right.
I think if things escalate further and things become like there's an international war going on. I'm concerned because, like in the U.S. during the World War II, the Japanese were, okay, you're the enemy. We're going to round you up and put you in a camp. I hope Russia doesn't get to that point with Americans. I think it's unlikely. And
Yeah.
I'm very vocally in support of the Russian government. So, but I don't know. I hope that we don't go down that path.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends in the Russian government, and I
You
see no
know,
indication of that whatsoever.
either
So if you're an American
things
and you're wondering, that's just not the case.
good.
That's
Good.
not happening at all.
Yeah.
And I even, because I've talked to people about it, and they know the difference, just like regular Russians know the difference between Americans and DC. And to your point before, I mean, Russians, they like Americans. It's DC they don't like. So for sure. Yeah,
What's
I've
funny
had
to
no issues. They all like me on the street. Yes, Peter? So here, I think we have a sound lag. Can you hear me okay? I think so. You are frozen. So I wonder, is it you or me? The audience will tell us in the comments who froze.
Yeah.
So, well, anyway, so Dan wants to press you a little bit. What economic storm? Can you clarify what is happening when it's happening, Peter?
Well, there's big banks right now in the U.S. that are failing, and again, most people are just sleepwalking and don't even want to acknowledge it. Now, the U.S. government is downplaying these failures. Well, it's gonna keep going. It's hard to the timing. Everybody wants to know the timing, and I think only God knows the timing. What I know is it's going to happen. I just don't know when, and it's not just my quote unquote opinion, because this is an idea that people say when I try to share these facts with them. They say, "Well, that's your opinion." It's like, no, most opinions aren't based on solid facts, and so the timing. Everybody wants to. I want to know because it's going to be critical to know, if you still have assets in places that are like if you have money in a U.S. bank, is it safe? And my answer is no, it's not. Now, in smaller banks, it's probably safer, and credit unions and federal credit unions, things like that, it's safer than in these bigger banks. But put it this way, I have money in U.S. banks and I have money in Russian banks. I trust my money in the Russian banks. That's not These Russian banks are solid, and they're the money. I trust them, not 100%, but pretty high. I don't trust U.S. banks at all, like zero.
Yeah.
I trust U.S. banks as much as I trust the U.S. government. So I don't the timing. I just know we're getting closer and closer to this. I'm glad we have more time to prepare because it's a blessing that it's. But the flip side is, the longer this goes on, the worse it's the start of this. From what I can tell, there's going to be some big event this year. I think a high likelihood this event's going to happen this year. The start of it. I don't know what that's going to look like, but whatever it is, it's not going to be good.
Do you think the U.S. presidency can have a positive or negative effect on this, or do you think it's inevitable? It's going to happen no matter who is president next.
Oh yeah, people don't understand. Um, the people who caused this are above the politicians, like above all the politicians. So thinking that the politicians or even the president are in control of this, that's not the reality. It's follow the money. And these
Okay.
people who have created this mess, they know they've created the mess because in my research, I found that these people who created the mess, they're taking steps to protect themselves. They know this is coming.
Mhm.
I know this because I've got friends all over the world who are deeply connected with banks, with gold and silver, um, all over the world. They're all seeing the same thing, that the ultra rich are taking cover. They're preparing for this storm. So
Mhm.
you know, I know this because these people I trust have done the research, and I'm personal friends with a lot of these people. We talk like once or twice a week, literally all over the world, and they're saying, "Hey, storm's coming," and they explain why in detail. It's a bit technical, but um, all the signs are pointing towards something big happening sooner than later. Timing, again, I don't know. Now I think they know because I think they're going to pull the plug.
Mm. Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
They're going to warn all their friends, hey, we're going to pull the plug, whatever, on a certain date. And all their friends are like, okay, thanks.
Thanks. All right. Well, okay. So Trump's not going to save us all.
No, oh,
So
no,
next
no.
question from Unseen Dimension. I'm an artist, writer, sculptor, and firearms instructor. I am also, so you need to watch my episode, Guns in Russia. And I am also fairly conversant in Russian. What kind of future would I have there if I immigrated? Peter?
Oh, I think this is funny. This is a great question because I came through to Russia from Mongolia,
Mhm.
and I was on the train, and we got to the border, and the Mongolian guards came on and checked all our documentation, and we started the train up, went for another 5 minutes, and then the Russian guards came on, and they were quizzing me, and I guess what I was saying to them wasn't making sense because I'm saying, well, I want to move to Russia, I want to live here, and they're looking at me like, you're coming from America and you want to live in Russia? What? And so they
Mhm.
actually took me off the train, and I sat down in a big room, and two of the Russian border guards, one of them didn't speak English, but the other got a translator, and the translator came over and she said, now, why are you coming to Russia? And I said, well, I think Russia will be the best place to live for the next 100 years. So I want to move here and raise a family here. And they both looked at me
Mhm.
like I was insane. I mean, like, okay, you're coming from America and, the land of opportunity, and you think Russia will be the best place to live for the next 100 years. I said, yeah, I think that's so. To answer his question, I think if you want to right now, even right now, before the storm, Russia is freer and safer than the United States, and I think that's a sad statement, but I believe it to be true. So, and I think that will only get the standard of living here will only get better and better. And I believe, by my calculations, that um, at some point the standard of living of Russians will be at or above anything America has ever had. Now let that sink in. There's Russians who still are in Russia who want to go to America. I'm like, don't do that because things are really going to get very good here. I mean, very good. So come to Russia.
I mean, they're already pretty fantastic for me, that's for sure. All right.
I think
Go ahead.
from what I understand, there's still, I don't know, between 10 and 20% of the Russian population in poverty.
Mhm.
But that's changing quickly. I mean, and President Putin's done not just a great job. I don't. He's going to go down in history as one of the best Russian leaders like ever, like hands down. Like if he's not the best, one of the very best Russian leaders that Russia's ever had. Because what he's done with the economy and turning things around is really nothing short of amazing. Just really,
Okay.
it's just, yeah.
But for the algorithm, just to be clear, Peter, we don't know who is behind Crocus, and we have no opinion on Putin in general, right?
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to say something interesting that you off of what you said, but I forgot what it was. So maybe it'll come back to me. In the meantime, here's a question from Svetlana Vladimirova, who is on this show a lot in the chat. I sense that Peter is a romantic in a large sense, not just roses, moonlight, and chocolates. Are foreigners attracted to move here because they have romantic notions about Russia? Peter, what do you think?
Oh, that's so funny. I think Svetlana thinks that I don't have a realistic picture of Russia,
Mm-hmm.
but I really do. I don't put rose-colored glasses on and pretend Russia doesn't have problems, because Russia does have problems.
Mm-hmm.
I know alcoholism among men is at a epidemic level. I think. I
Mm-hmm.
think the trauma of the 1990s is still palpable. That I didn't know this until I came here and lived here for a while. That the 1990s in Russia were horrific. It was bad.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually worse than the Great Depression in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still a lot of trauma on the soul of Russians.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I think Svetlana doesn't give her fellow Russians the credit of Russians are tough and
Mm-hmm.
Russians are smart. Russians are survivors. And would I want to play chess with a Russian? No. So all these things are being a tough survivor, smart, but I know there are social issues. And
Mm-hmm.
these things are going to have to be addressed. But I have enough faith in Russians that they'll get through this like they've gotten through all the other garbage that they've gone through in history. And I do believe we're going to see a Russian golden age.
Mm-hmm.
That is just, I have enough faith. I don't know if Svetlana has enough faith in Russians, but I do.
Mm-hmm.
That they'll find a way to integrate into the modern world and move forward, still keeping Russian traditions, the good Russian traditions, the solid Christian values, the family values.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm under no illusion that this is going to be easy, because I don't think it will be. And I think the current world environment is not going to be easy for anybody. But when this storm hits, there's no other place in the world that I would want to be than Russia. That's just it. So, yeah.
Well, for myself, I never had any romantic notions of Russia growing up in America. I never looked at Russia and thought, wow, that sounds like a romantic place. Never, ever did I think that, not for one moment. But since I've been living here and not long after, living here, I have a big, strong romantic notion of Russia. I think that's a fair characterization once you actually live here and know what it is. Do you have a history
Well,
with Svetlana? It sounds like you do, Peter.
oh, she's funny. She's a regular on a lot of channels, including the
Oh,
Duran.
oh, okay.
And she was pretty regular on Kevin's channel also. So
Aha. So
yeah,
she's
she's a sweetheart. She pretends to be, like kind of a hard case, but I see through all that. She's a sweetheart at heart. She just thinks I have this, romantic notion of, everything is like, super cool in Russia and the Russians are all, great people. It's like, yeah, no, I think it's like any other country, but it's given what Russia's been through and what Russians have been through, I think it's amazing, they of where they are now. And I just get a kick. There's so many things in Russian culture. It's almost a daily occurrence. I see something that I find hilarious. It's just very different from, well, not very different, but there are some things that are pretty different from like on the street. Russians aren't real expressive, and I'm very expressive. So if I look
right.
someone, if I'm looking someone, and they look at me and like, man, he's too friendly. I'm like, too friendly. Okay, I'm too friendly. So,
Well,
I
we
just
do have
get a
to
kick.
practice learning their culture. Otherwise, they're just going to think we're an
Yeah,
idiot laughing all the
I'm
time.
Russian. I'm Russian.
All right. Well, this question is just, I guess, addressed to Americans in general coming here, or maybe people that are wondering what it's like living here. I get this question asked a lot. Maybe you want to take a stab at it. If not, I can answer it. What happens to immigrants during drafts in Russia? Peter, do you know about this?
Yeah, it's my understanding as a right now as a non-citizen, I can't officially join the Russian army. Is that the case, or am I misinformed?
You are not misinformed. On
Okay.
top of that, you have to be able to speak Russian.
Yeah.
And on top of that, Russia's not drafting people like they think, not like
No.
in a Vietnam America war sense.
Right.
It is true that all Russian men, in their college years, you could say they serve for 1 year. It's like their year
Yeah.
of basic training, and
Yeah.
that's it. Now, the people that have been called up to the front for the past 2 years, these are people that did more than their 1 year of training.
Yeah.
That had more experience in the military. Those are the only people being called. And
Right.
it's my understanding that Russia is getting thousands of new volunteer recruits a day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a falsehood if the Western media is going around saying, "Oh my gosh, Russia is taking people off the street and putting them on the front line." That is not happening at all.
Yeah.
And I even talked to a guy in church who went and served um, because he needed to, and he didn't want to be on the front line, and so he was able to serve in some other capacity. So
Yeah.
like driving trucks or whatever.
Yeah.
There's many positions that need to be taken in a situation
Yeah.
such as this. It's
Yeah.
not like Saving Private Ryan for everybody.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, if
but
if 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 the government would allow me, I would serve. I'd rather not pick up a gun and shoot at somebody. Because of my religious convictions of trying not to kill. But if I could serve in some other capacity to help, to help the cause, I
mhm.
would.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, if it got to the point where you and I were to serve in some way, I'd be like Tom Cruise's character in that Live Die Repeat movie, Edge of Tomorrow.
Okay.
It'd be,
Yeah.
helping out in the way that I can help out. I mean, I'm gonna be 50 soon, guys.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I've got you by
all
a
right.
couple of years. I think even by my age, I am excluded from. Even if they did have a draft, they'd say, "Ah, Pete, you're too old."
Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, countries aren't stupid. They want to be successful in their endeavors,
Oh,
and they're
yes.
not going to
Yeah.
grab people that
Yes.
have that are
No.
like completely incompetent. And
Yeah.
you are completely incompetent, Peter, in this regard, and so am I.
Well, physically, I'm pretty physically fit. I'm not in the best shape, but it wouldn't take me long to get in shape that I could hold my own. You know,
Okay,
in any
cool.
yeah, wouldn't be a problem. But
Very good.
yeah,
So here's another question. And maybe you know the answer, maybe you do not. What's the
yeah.
process like for a foreigner to create a business for exporting goods that are manufactured in Russia, cost and time wise? Do you know the answer to this as a American businessman?
Um, I don't, but because of this, I do know this because of the sanctions. The West has made this type of thing dealing with the West extremely hard, if not impossible. Now, Russia
Hmm.
can do business with a lot of Eastern, and there are a lot of countries Russia can still do business with. So I
Hmm.
know in the current environment, because of all the, you know, what's going on, this now after this event ends, maybe things will get back to a point where there'll be normalized trade. But I know the trade right now is not normal at all.
Mm.
Because a
Okay.
good example is I know, like you can buy anything Apple here in Russia you want to, but it doesn't come directly from the U.S. or from it comes. I know one route it comes through Turkey. Now I know I read there's a second country. I don't remember what it was, but definitely a lot of Apple products go through Turkey and they make it here into Russia. So there's no
Mm.
lack of like buying anything Apple here. So the sanctions are really, and you know this, you can go to any store in Russia and there's no shortage of anything, like literally, like no shortage of anything.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, yeah, if you don't know, if you've never been here, it's completely, I mean, it's like just like America, I
Yeah,
mean, they have the same goods and services, it's not like a cold, dark, scary place as I was led to believe. Um, but I'm curious, it's a little bit off topic, but since you came in with Dan through
yeah,
Mongolia, Wild
yeah.
Siberia, what was Mongolia like? I've never been there.
Oh wow, we were there for let's see, less than a week. It was really interesting. Ulaanbaatar is, I guess, the capital,
Uh-huh.
and I flew in there, and we were there for let's see, not quite a week, just a day short of a week.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting. It's this. The capital there is huge. I don't know how many million. It's what, like 1 or 2 or 3 million. It's a
Mhm.
big city, but it's
Right.
this funny combination of like old Soviet buildings and brand new buildings like right next door. So it's
Huh.
this like, okay, old Soviet, like apartment building. And you could tell looking at it, it's like, yeah, that's an old Soviet apartment. Then right next door, a brand new, skyscraper going up. Um, by and large, most people were pretty friendly. There were some beggars on the street that were a little aggressive, but not. It wasn't bad. We toured
Uh-huh.
around a bit. Dan took me around a little bit. I think it was. I think they're good people, and as I understand it, I was a lot of the older folks speak Russian, but younger folks have kind of like want to learn English. So whatever their, I don't know what their language is, but they're, want to, they're, if you speak to a lot of some younger um, Mongolians in Russian, they're like, don't know it. But older Russians definitely, or older
So is it like a
Mongolians.
tourist is it like a
What's that?
tourist place because you like Mongolia? Is it like a tourist place? Because you were there for like a week. Like, what do you do there when you're hanging out?
Um, no, I wouldn't call it a tourist place. It's the capital is their business center, basically, of the
Uh-huh.
country. So
Right.
it seemed like there was a lot of business activity. Now, I did think I saw some tourist activity, but it wasn't. When was this? This was in July, and
Hmm.
this it was during a holiday too. The whole week was a holiday, so that was a bit unusual. That I think it wasn't normal. It's, the holiday week was not a normal, there's probably more activity than normally would be in certain places.
Right. So you're just sitting in your hotel room the whole time?
Oh no, we went to look at some of the we went to some of the kind of like war memorials and a little bit, and then the main square is huge, kind of like they have a main square kind of like Red Square, but it's different. It's big, but no. So every day, we'd go to restaurants. We'd go, do some sightseeing, walk around the city. Yeah, and I think the only time we took a cab from the airport to where we were staying, and then when we left, we took a cab from where we were staying over to the train station, and then we rode the train up into to I don't know, what was that, 24-hour? It was a 24-hour train ride, I think, up into Irkutsk.
Wow. What were the war memorials for?
I think it was World War II.
Okay.
Yeah.
Victory Day, they call it, which is coming up here.
Yeah.
In Russia.
They had a big war memorial up on a hill, and it was this big mosaic. It's actually pretty cool. I wasn't feeling too well because I guess I caught something on the trip over. So there were a couple of days there I was kind of feeling under the weather. I don't think it wasn't. I don't think it was food related, but there was a couple of days there I wasn't feeling too hot, and I recovered pretty quickly. By the time I got to Russia, I was feeling okay.
Well, here's another audience question: is there a job market for actuaries in Russia? And guys, we're going to go for like another 30 minutes, so do not be afraid to send us a question, and share this video so more people can be in the live. But do you have an answer to this question, Peter?
Yeah, I think there's a severe shortage for anybody who's well qualified. I think one of the reasons for that right now, because of the situation going on, is a lot of people are doing things for the government, that in another country, to serve their country. So there are, but it's not just that. And this is a demographic problem, not just in Russia, but all of Europe, all of the United States. I think the only countries that aren't having demographic problems to fill necessary positions are maybe China and India. And then I think, and a lot of the countries in the global south their populations are growing, but most of Europe, they're below replacement of birth. So there's definitely, and Russia government is actually encouraging, even President Putin has said, have babies. But no, I think anyone who's really well qualified, Russia would want them. But you can't be if you're anti-Russian, don't even think about, because it won't work out. So you better be supportive of where Russia is now and where it's going.
Okay. All right. Well, here's another question. Someone wants to ask you, Peter, have you met a woman you like yet? Or women in general that you like yet?
Wow. Yeah, they're about 30 to 40% of the women in Russia could be supermodels. I mean, legitimately. I've run into a lot of women who have like children, but they're divorced, and I'm not really a big fan. I wouldn't say I would completely exclude this, but to answer that question, the spiritual path that I'm on is not an easy path. And I guess I'm looking for, what's the term, the modern term, I've forgotten the term. A very unusual, a woman who's intelligent, but, attractive, someone who wants to have children. So no, to answer your question, I haven't met. And then, it's someone, and I'm older too. So I think that's concerning to some women too. And, like how, and my goal is to make it over 100. So I've got a number of years left to do that. And I think I can do it. I'm pretty healthy. I exercise, I eat healthy. I don't do any stupid stuff. Don't drink. Well, I drink on occasion on holidays, but I'm not I could go months without a drink. And I've actually gone years without having a drink. But yeah, I am encouraged because Russian women are very strong and very intelligent. And these are things that are very attractive to me. But there are, younger Russian women who've kind of been westernized. And I'm not a big fan of this. I mean, westernized is, like, I don't need a man. Like, well, if you want to have a family, a husband might be a kind of integral part of this process. Right. So anyway.
Well, you have come to a country where the government is pushing traditional family values, and their main religion is Christian orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And you said you're on a spiritual journey, and you've chosen to move here and live here. So what does that mean? Like, what is your spiritual journey?
The best way to describe this without getting too I can't even remember. I just knew I felt out of place in the U.S. Like, okay, I'm just in the wrong place. So I was praying about it. Like, okay, God, where do you want me to be? And I don't even remember the kind of the process of how I found Russia. But every step of the way, I said, okay, God, if you want this to work out, you'll just give me the steps. You'll bring the people into my experience. And not that and I'm like, okay, what do I need? What is my role in this process of listening to? So it was like, I guess it's how I found Dan, and then came to Russia. And then from there, it's like, okay, am I going to Vladivostok or am I going to Crimea? And that's how I found Kevin. And then, and then things have worked out with immigration that are, I tried to explain some of these things, like the last day to get things done for immigration was December 25th at the immigration office in Simferopol.
For you, based on your paperwork.
Yes, yeah. And literally, with 5 minutes left until the office closed on December 25th, we got all the paperwork done. And the chance, and what happened that day was crazy. I was at the beginning of the day, I'm like, I don't know if we can do this. And then there were events during that day. It's like, this might not happen. And if that day didn't happen, if I didn't get all that paperwork done that day, then the whole process would have to start over. I'm like, oh, that's not good.
But yes, literally, Russians take paperwork very seriously.
Oh yeah, yes, sir, they do. And so there have been like 5 or 10 events that if I tried to explain to someone, like if I tried to plan those events out humanly, it's like, yeah, that won't happen. It's just like each step I just said, okay, God, if you want this to happen, this will happen. Like that day, like if you want this to happen, and it did with 5 minutes. We were the last people to walk out of the immigration office that day, the last everyone else worked there. Everyone else who was there earlier who wasn't a worker, we were the last people to leave the building.
Mhm.
So it's just the process. I'm like, okay, God, just guide me. And when I get direction, like, okay, it's what feels like the best, steps to take. And I don't try to, I mean, I think I have what I want to have family here, and I want to be married to a Russian woman. I want to have kids, but if that's not God's plan, that's okay too. I mean,
Mhm.
so I basically just said, okay, God, I'm putting this in your hands. If
Right.
you want me to be married to a Russian woman, the right woman will, come into my life. And
Mhm.
again, I'm not just sitting idly by going, okay, where's the woman going to show up? It's like, no, I'm out, every day, in society, learning Russian, learning more Russian, learning about Russians, what to do, what not to do, how to behave. Um,
Mhm.
and so it's different. It's definitely, it's a bit of a culture shock, but it's not really shocking to me because I've traveled a relatively good amount internationally. So I'm pretty
Mhm.
open to like, okay, I'm an American, I'm in a foreign country. I need to behave like I'm a visitor in someone's house. I need to show respect and courtesy
Mhm.
and thoughtfulness and um, and I think God brought me here for a purpose. I don't know. I think that purpose will unfold, but I don't know exactly how it will unfold. But I'm trusting God will, you know, I'm just trusting God. So, okay,
Got it.
God, what's next? So, and I think a big part of this too is I'm um, I'm enjoying this process because although it's a culture shock, every day I'm learning something new about Russians, and Russians it's a fascinating culture. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just all these differences that are really unique and good. Um,
Well,
um,
you are certainly talking like a Christian, and you had to prove your membership with Christian Science for your job at the college.
oh yeah.
Now that you're here, are you have you like moved your membership to Christian Science over here, or where are you going to church here now?
Well, actually, I don't. I think there's Christian Science Society. I think in St. Petersburg, but I don't even know how many people attend that. I'm pretty sure there's no Christian Science church either in Moscow or St. Petersburg that I'm aware of. Now, society is a smaller kind of group. It's not there's not enough people to have a formal church, but as I understand it, there is an informal group that meets there. So yeah, I think I'm one of the few Christian scientists or practicing Christian scientists in Russia. Now I know at one
Okay.
time in in the 19th and 20th century, there were a lot of Christian scientists all around the world, even in
Mhm.
Russia. But I
Right.
think that number now is very. So to your point, I still practice Christian Science, but I'm not attending church right now.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay.
um, yeah, but I
So,
just
so it, is it different biblically then for the Christian Scientists? Because I know, like in the Bible, it says to not give up meeting together. So, is Christian Science would it be considered Christianity, or is it like a variant?
well, depends on who you talk to. I I believe that it's one of the purest forms of Christianity that exists right now in the world. Now, if you talk to some people who don't understand Christian Science well, they would call it a cult, which is not. It's
Okay.
not at all
Okay.
because it's we don't. I mean, there was a founder. The Mary Baker Eddy was the founder of the church, but we don't worship her. and cults, worship, specific people. Now, I do in Christian Science that we have the Science and Health, which is the King James version of the Bible. Those two books that we use as our guides, but I tend not to talk about this a lot because I think being a real Christian is less about talking and more about action. And I think I mentioned this to you before we came online. That's why I don't share this with a lot of people, because it's like, okay, let my actions speak for who I am.
Sure.
And I believe strongly in this idea of, if you're gonna, one of the cores of Christian Science is you love everybody, even your enemies. Right. So I have no enemies, and I hate nobody. I have no grudges. I hold no ill will toward anybody, because if I'm gonna behave like a real Christian, this is how I have to think and how to behave. And I forgive anyone that has done me what people would consider wrong. And there's been a number of instances in my life that people have taken advantage of me, but I've forgiven them, and even friends or family. So, yeah, I'm just
thanks for answering, Peter. I'm just curious and just asking because I don't know. And I just my last thought, and you can say no, you don't want to answer, but would you, at this point, would you join a different denomination and be that denomination and a Christian Science, or in Christian Science would you just continue on as you are as a Christian Scientist and not be part of a actual church getting together? Again, you don't have to answer. I'm just
no. It's a good question. Yeah, I couldn't join another church, but that doesn't mean I can't live as a true Christian, without. Now I do support Russian Christianity, and I do support Russians in their quest to be better Christians.
Right.
Absolutely support this. Right. So I don't look at my being a Christian Scientist as being in any way something that would not support Russians who are Christians and their quest to grow as Christians. And I think God put me on this path for a reason. And I did stray away from Christian Science when I was younger, and I came back to it. God brought me back to it. So I know this is a God-guided thing. So, like I said, I can't speak to what God's going to guide me in the future, but I believe strongly that this religion that I was born into is something that God wants me to be a part of. But like I said, I don't think it's something that is a negative thing in relation to any relationships, whether it's friendships or whether it's a deep whether I get married. That God will work this out. That there will be a harmonious relationship, whether it's friendships or marriage or whatever. That,
got it.
In a very Christian way.
Very good. All right, well, let's get to a few more practicals before the podcast comes to an end, the live stream. We have a question here. How about bank accounts? Can they be opened outside of Russia? If not, how easy is it to open one?
Well, in Russia, it's super easy to open a bank account. I have 3 Russian bank accounts.
Okay,
and you're a foreigner. What's that?
And you're a foreigner.
Yeah, I am. Just needed the first bank account. They wanted my passport. They wanted my social security number. I think they wanted even a U.S. address. Oh, and they wanted a Russian address too, but there was a temporary address where I was staying that I used. And then let's see, the other 2 all they required was my passport and my immigration, my visa. Now the first one, it was my tourist visa was, they were cool with that, and my passport. And then this latest one I opened, I do have a temporary residency visa now, along with my passport, and then just a local address. But that was the last one. Was I walked into the local bank here and had my third bank account in 30 minutes. I mean, it was very quick, very efficient, and that's with a major bank, one of the major banks in Russia. So yeah, it's now moving assets from outside of Russia to inside Russia. That's a whole nother can of worms.
Right. So, but can you open up your account when you're outside of Russia, or do you have to be in the country? Do you know?
I, as far as I know, you have to be physically present.
Right. I believe that is correct.
Yeah, with a passport. And now I've heard of cases where there's been attempts to hire a lawyer to open an account for you in your, give them power of attorney in Russia. I haven't heard that that's worked, but all I can say is my personal experience is they require you physically to be there with the passport, identifying this is you, and and then having a Russian address. And yeah, from that standpoint, just very easy.
Okay, Peter. So in next question, because I want to race through these questions in as much as we can. What's the best place to live in Russia, in your opinion? What we're looking at on the screen is what you sent me. So you are in, well, tell us, where are you and what do you think is the best place to live in if you're coming to Russia?
Well, I'm in Yalta in southern Crimea. Personally, I like warm weather, so I'm not a big fan of real cold weather. So I would strongly suggest either southern Crimea along the coast. It's beautiful here, really. I call it actually the Russian Riviera because the views here are just stunning. I think this is here in southern Crimea along the coast, Yalta, and then all along the southern coast it's like Florida that was 30 or 40 years ago. It's kind of undiscovered. I think at some point a lot of Russians will have a second home here if they don't already have like an apartment or a second home, and then will eventually retire here. Now there are a lot of people who like Sochi, which is much further south. Sochi is too commercial for me. The Sochi area is very commercialized. It's warmer because it's further south, and it is Sochi is on the Black Sea. But no, if you like warm weather, I would definitely suggest either in southern Crimea, Yalta, or down in Sochi. But if you like, because Sochi, there's a lot during the summer. It's crazy. Like half of Moscow goes to Sochi.
Yes,
I experienced that. I flew into Sochi last summer in the middle of July, and the Sochi airport and Sochi in town, it was people everywhere. I mean, literally like everywhere. So I know there are a lot of tourists that come to southern Crimea too from Moscow or St. Petersburg. So I would definitely, if you like warm weather, I would say southern Crimea or Sochi area.
I would say Moscow when you first come, especially if you're working and you don't know the language that well, because it's like New York, it's very international and there's plenty of English speakers around. There's lots of opportunities, but I do think once you get acclimated and you're doing good financially and you can do so, then a warm weather place might be good for you. But surprisingly for me, winters in Moscow are not a big deal for me. Now I'm a big guy. Maybe that helps, but yeah. And I'll move us off the screen at the very end, guys. In about 10 minutes, I'll let you look at what he sent me. It's pretty impressive. I mean, I would never have guessed 10 years ago that this scene is in Russia. Um,
Yeah.
but
And
anyway,
this isn't just this is just the beginning of their redevelopment. There's a lot of places in Yalta that need to be renovated and modernized. But literally, I see this at some point being, when I say Russian Riviera, this isn't, I think it will, there's a lot, there's a lot of money in Russia, big money. And when these people decide to start moving down here and buying, and I even know, who is it? Graf, what is he, the head of Sberbank? He's purchased a lot of property here. And I think he intends to develop a lot of property here in southern Crimea. And
oh wow.
yeah, so there's I see the potential here. Literally, I think this is southern or northern Florida, like the Panhandle 30 years ago.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm from Florida. So.
Yeah.
But now here's a question that I'll ask you, because I haven't been to Crimea yet. Crimea, when I look at a map, it looks close to the front. So do you feel safe? Are you safe? How close are you to the front? Because I would think that that might be a calculation the person has to make when deciding where to live.
Well, Crimea is pretty big. And there's a big distance between northern Crimea, where the border of the country border, that's above it, and now there have been some attacks at the in Sevastopol. It's a Navy base, and there was even an attack on a ship, a Russian ship, about 4 miles from where I was living in the Black Sea, and the ship sank, but everyone, all the Russian sailors got off it okay. To answer your question, I feel safer here than I do in any U.S. big city. There's just normal daily life here. Everyone goes about their daily life. They don't worry about, what's going on is much further north, typically. There have been isolated attacks on the bridge and on military installations, but the military handles these fairly well, so not much gets through. The chances of being involved in any of that is pretty slim.
Okay. How about this? Will you give up your American passport, Peter? This is a question. It's not my question, by the way.
Sure. No, I understand. I've been asked this question recently too. I'd like to keep my citizenship, because if I do have children, I want them to have dual citizenship to give them maximum, choice about. And if you have more than one passport, it gives you more opportunities to travel around the world. So if my children had Russian and U.S. passports, this would be, advantageous to them. Now, I'm not going to willingly give up my passport unless I'm forced to. If I had to choose between, if I was forced to, like, okay, you have to choose. Well, I'm not a Russian citizen yet, but I want to become a Russian citizen and get a Russian passport. Once I have that passport, if I'm forced to choose, at this point, I would choose the Russian passport, because I've lost all trust in the U.S. government.
That's a good answer. All right, here's another question. Are you looking for staff or business partners who would like to move to Russia?
Oh. Well, that's a good question. I would like to start. I would like to move enough of my assets out of the U.S., and I've moved quite a bit already, but more to have rental property here. It's a little too early in my process to do that. But no, I would be open to having employees here. But I'm trying to get, one step at a time. I've got to get, next step is permanent residency, and then after that is citizenship. Well, and in this process, I want to find a wife. So these are things I need to try to get, like, okay, God. But no, I'm open to the idea of having business partners, good partners. I know good partners are hard to find, but I would be open to, if there was a good fit, to find someone that that would we could benefit each other equally and figure out some type of arrangement. I would be open to that, but I think it's right now it's too early in the process of me being here to kind of even kind of discuss that. But no, it's something I do want to own rental property here. Now, that's a little complicated because as a non-citizen, I can own an apartment in Crimea, but I can't actually buy land or a house. So once I have Russian citizenship, I can buy basically anything I want, anywhere. But without Russian citizenship, now that could be solved by, if I get married to a Russian woman, everything could be put in her name. Now I'm going to have to trust this woman.
Well, if you're marrying her, Peter, you better trust her.
Thank you. So I was married once and that didn't work out. So this one is I want to find one that I can trust. It's like, okay, I'm gonna put everything in your name. Don't kick me out of the house.
All right. So where is the last question? Not the last. Oh, here it is. Maybe the last. Depends on how quickly you answer. Russia withstood the sanctions and was even able to boost the economy. Could the United States withstand the same sanctions? Just a hypothetical, I suppose.
Oh, no chance. There's no leadership in Washington. The level of incompetence is off the scales. I don't know whether it's malicious or incompetent, or whether they're just evil, or whether it's a combination of the three. But they are just clueless in Washington. So that's why I say this: when the storm hits in the U.S., it's going to be at least 20 years, because like most of Congress is compromised. Like a huge, like at least 95% of Congress, 95% of Congress just voted to send more aid to the country above, Crimea. That's crazy, because we know that's a lost cause. So no. And the BRICS alliance is what the United States will be going up against. And I believe, according to my numbers, at some point, 90% of the world will be behind the BRICS. So if you're with the US in that 10% and BRICS says we're not going to trade with you, that would basically be sanctions, and you're going to be done. Well, heck, if China just said they'd stop trading with the U.S., economy would screech to a halt today. And China is one of the BRICS countries. So Russia and India and Brazil and 90% of the world says we're not going to trade with you, guess what happens next? Not good things.
Right. Well, I wanted to say before we end, we got a donation of $2 from Drew Wagner. Thank you, Drew. Yeah, he says, Wild Siberia doesn't seem to be the real guy. I guess you think that his account got hacked, Drew. I'll have to go back and check that out. I don't know, because when I'm doing the show, I'm scanning for question marks only. So intrigue you just gave us all, Drew. We're all going to have to go back and read the comments and find out if
Yeah.
it's really Dan or not.
Yeah.
But Peter, is there anything you want to say in the last 30 seconds before we end?
Yeah, I think some people will, especially Americans, will maybe watch this and say, you know, might be a Putin apologist. Well, I've said this before in another interview. I don't apologize for anything the president of Russia does because I think he's done an amazing job. I think he's actually a man of God, and I think he's a good man. I think it's unfortunate that the West has painted him to be something that he's not. I mean, just look at the way President of Russia treats children. Just that alone. If you look at how he treats children and you think he's a bad guy, then you're real confused. So I would have never moved to a country where I didn't respect the leadership, and I have the highest regard for the Russian leadership, the highest regard.
Well, thanks for sharing, Peter. Thanks for coming on. Guys, like I said a few minutes ago, I'm going to take us off the screen and I'll let you look at what Peter sent us so you get an idea of what else Russia might look like, get an idea of how it looks where Peter lives. But this has been Expat American, me. Thanks for watching. Click like, subscribe, share this with your friends. Go check out some of my edited videos. They are full of information and some humor with my family. You saw my son earlier. I'm here with my 5 kids and my Russian wife. Peter, thank you so much. And guys,
Thanks,
take a look
appreciate it.
at Yalta.